Hello, this is Ben, and today we're going to show you how to trim a bush. You probably have already trimmed bushes before, but I get a lot of questions from people who don't know how to make bushes round. Or if they try to make them round, they come out looking too small or too short or too skinny or too wide, and it's confusing for them. So what we're looking at is this bush, and come around here, Mama. Thank you to Mama for filming. So this thing is way too big. So you can see on here, here's the new growth, and if I cut it back to the old growth, it's still going to be way too big. It's still going to block the house. So what I need to do is go way back and like create a new shape, but we want a nice round shape down in there. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to figure out a height that we like, really based on the windows of the house. You want to be able to see the windows of the house or the porch or something like that, some important feature of the house, the shutter or something like that. You want to be able to see those. So that's going to determine our flat top. And then we're going to make it a little wider than it is tall. So what we're going to do is we're just going to flatten off the top, and then we're going to square it, make a box. And then once you've made your box, then you just come in and round off the corners all the way around the top edges and then around the side edges. And then on these old azaleas, they really try to creep out along the bottom, so you got to work extra hard to cut that away. There's newer varieties that don't do that anymore. But a lot of houses have these old azaleas from the 70s, and a lot of houses, these azaleas are dying. But that's neither here nor there. So what I'm going to do is get started, and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, now when you're trimming one severely like this, you're going to have to pull out the growth so you can see what you're doing. And of course it helps to have, $700 bush trimmer, but you've got something, you can do it. Now the thing is, these are azalea bushes and this is the south. You don't want to trim these after July or you're not going to have blooms next year. You can trim them severely though before July or as close to possible as when they just bloomed. It's May right now, so we're pretty close to when they just bloomed. And they've still got some old blooms on here, so it should come back just fine. But when a bush is really overgrown, sometimes you just have to cut it way back, and just deal with the fact that you may not have blooms next year, so that it won't become a monster. All right, now we have a crude flat top. It's not perfectly smooth, but it doesn't have to be at this stage. But we have our height kind of figured out. So once we have our height figured out, we can step back and take a look at this thing and see, okay, it's a lot wider than it is tall. This thing is almost 3 times wider than it is tall. So you want to think like, well, what looks good, For example, we'll come over here and look at this bush over here. The overall dimensions of this bush right here, even though this one needs trimming, the overall width to height ratio is pretty much what most people are looking for. That's pretty much, they want a bushy shape. They want it a little bit wider than it is tall. Nice kind of squatty bush. So we don't want this monster wide thing. And what we're going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to go boom. And I'm going to go boom in 2 sides. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to go front and back at hopefully about the same width. And then we'll have a box. And then what we're going to do is make our box into a round shape. this bush has been severely trimmed at this point, but it's still not in the shape that we want. It was way too tall. You couldn't see the house. That's bad. And people always ask me, well, how tall, what should my bushes be? You typically, if you have a porch and you have a railing, you want to be able to see the railing. And when you have windows, when you have a house, you want to be able to see the house. You don't want a yard with a jungle in front of it. This guy had gotten way too big because I procrastinated on cutting him back severely, but at some point you have to do that. So what we're going to do now is we've got our cube, and we're going to just come across this sort of top edge, that edge, that edge, that edge, and then come down our corners on the sides, and she will be round. Hopefully you can see, even though there's not much green on this bush, you can see a round shape taking form. Because of the pine tree, I have to come in more on this side than I like to, but on this side you can really see your typical bushy round shape. And this bush has been brought down to size. Don't worry about killing, a really old azalea like this. If it does die, there's really nice new varieties that we can plant. But more importantly, what a lot of people do in lieu of doing this is every other year or every 3 years they'll just cut it off this tall, and then that thing will naturally make the natural bush shape, because the shape we're going for is really the natural shape of the bush. It naturally makes this big round shape, and it'll do that. So people, a lot of times older people, will cut them off this tall to like a stump, and then in the course of 2 or 3 years it'll just come back. We don't want to do that. We want to kind of maintain something here, and we won't, in this yard, I probably won't trim anything else this severely, but this guy had just gotten out of control, and so there. So hopefully, can you see the round shape on the camera? All right, the only other thing is, of course, you have